$10 million. That's how much I stole from one of the most dangerous organizations on the planet. And honestly, at first, it felt like the greatest thing I'd ever done. Like I'd just beaten a system that nobody was supposed to beat. I had the money, I had a plan, and I had about 72 hours before anyone even noticed it was gone. But here's the thing about stealing from a cartel. They always notice. And when they do, they don't send lawyers, they don't send police. They send people who make you wish you'd never been born. So yeah, I stole $10 million, and it ruined every single life it touched, including mine, especially mine. This is how it happened. I grew up in a town so small, it didn't show up on most maps. The kind of place where your options were farming, construction, or leaving. Except nobody had the money to leave. My mother worked 2 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on every month. My father left before I was old enough to remember his face. No note, no goodbye, just an empty chair at breakfast and a mother who stopped smiling for 3 years. I dropped out of school at 15 and worked odd jobs to survive. Carrying crates, cleaning storefronts, running errands for people who paid me just enough to eat. That was my life. Wake up, survive, sleep, repeat. No future, no plan, just poverty making me invisible. But the thing about growing up with nothing is that when someone finally offers you something, you don't ask questions. You just take it. I was 17 when I started working for them. A guy from my neighborhood told me he had a job that paid 5 times what I was making. All I had to do was drive a truck from one town to another. Don't look in the back, don't ask questions. So I drove, and the money was more than I'd ever seen. Making in one night what used to take me 2 months. But driving turned into guarding. Guarding turned into counting. And counting turned into managing cash shipments at a stash house on the outskirts of the city. By 22, I was handling logistics for pickups across 3 zones. I wasn't important, just a worker bee, but I had access to something dangerous. I knew where the money moved, when it moved, and who was watching it. Every Tuesday and Thursday, collections came through our location. Duffel bags packed with cash. My job was to count it, log it in handwritten notebooks, and make sure it got loaded into the right vehicles. I never touched a dollar, because the one rule everyone understood without it ever being said was simple. You don't steal from these people. I once saw a man dragged out of a warehouse for skimming a few thousand. They found what was left of him 4 days later, and nobody said a word. That was enough to keep anyone in line for a lifetime. So no, I never thought about stealing. Not once. Until the night everything changed. It was a Thursday, heavier than usual. More collections, bigger hauls. But there was a dispute between 2 senior guys up the chain. Something about territory, and because of that, the transport team never showed up. The money came in like always. I counted it with 2 other guys, logged it, stacked it, but nobody came to pick it up. By 1:30 in the morning, the other 2 got called to the north side. My instructions were simple: sit tight, wait for transport. So there I was, alone, in a concrete room with no windows, surrounded by $10 million in cash, listening to a ceiling fan click every 3rd rotation because one of the blades was bent. And that's when the thought came. Not dramatic, not loud, just a whisper. What if I just took it? And the second it entered my brain, every rule, every fear, every image of what they do to people who cross them, it all went silent. Like someone hit mute on my survival instincts. All I could hear was that fan clicking. And that thought getting louder. I'm not a genius. I didn't have some movie blueprint on a whiteboard, but I had 5 years of watching the system from the inside, and I knew every gap. I knew which cameras were real and which were empty shells on the wall. I knew the GPS trackers on the vehicles were only checked twice a day. I knew the guard rotations left the south corridor empty between 1 and 4 in the morning. But the biggest weakness was the paper trail. The counting logs were handwritten in notebooks collected once a week. Since transport never showed, there was a gap. The Thursday numbers hadn't been reported yet and wouldn't be until Sunday. If I rewrote the logs to show 7 million instead of 10, the discrepancy might get lost in the chaos of the dispute happening above me. It only needed to buy me 72 hours. Not forever, just enough to disappear. I had 6 hours before the morning crew arrived. 6 hours to load $10 million into a truck, drive it somewhere nobody would ever look, stash it, come back, rewrite the numbers, and be sitting in my chair with coffee by sunrise. So that's exactly what I did. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the first bag. I remember that more than anything. My fingers numb and electric at the same time. Like every nerve was screaming at me to stop, while my brain kept saying, "Move faster." I loaded the bags one by one in total silence. Each one felt heavier than the last, but maybe that was just the weight of what I was doing settling into my chest. The truck started on the first try. I pulled out of the compound at 1:40 in the morning with the headlights off, rolling slow, like just another shadow. I didn't turn the lights on for 2 miles because I was too paranoid to breathe. Every dog barking sounded like an alarm. Every branch cracking under the tires sounded like a gunshot. My heart was so loud, I was convinced someone outside the truck could hear it. I drove 40 minutes to an old property that belonged to my mother's cousin. Dead for 3 years, nobody had touched the place. The house was rotting, collapsed roof, walls green with mold. But underneath it was a cellar, hidden behind a rusted shelf that you'd never find unless someone showed you where to look. I unloaded every bag into that cellar, covered the entrance with broken wood and metal sheeting, drove back, rewrote the logs, cleaned everything. And when the morning crew showed up at 6, I was sitting in the same chair, drinking the same cheap coffee, wearing the same bored face. Nobody suspected a thing. For 3 days, I was the guy who stole $10 million and got away with it. 3 surreal days of going to work, smiling at people I was betraying, and going home to stare at the ceiling, wondering if it was real. Then the transport team came back, asking about the pickup they missed. The senior guys started comparing numbers, and someone noticed the totals didn't match. Turns out, they had their own count from the collection point, a count I never knew existed. My rewritten logs didn't just look wrong, they looked like exactly what they were, a lie. Meetings behind closed doors, strangers at the compound, hard-faced men with shoulder holsters, and no small talk. The circle was getting tighter every hour, and I was standing in the middle of it. So I ran. That night I went to the cellar, grabbed what I could carry, $2 million in gym bags, and left everything else. My apartment, my phone, my name, all of it, gone. I took a bus to the border with a fake ID and a hat pulled to my eyebrows. For 16 hours, I thought I'd made it. Then I heard what they did. Men went to my mother's house, kicked the door in at 2 in the morning, tore through every room, every drawer. When they didn't find answers, they took her. Sat her in a room and asked her questions she didn't have answers to. My mother. The woman who worked 2 jobs and never asked anyone for anything, sitting across from men whose patience runs out fast because of me. They let her go. She wasn't hurt physically, but something in her broke after that. The way she flinched at noises. The way she stopped opening the door after dark. I did that. Not the cartel, me. I crossed the border and landed in a small town where nobody knew me. Rented a room above a mechanic shop, paid cash, didn't leave for 2 weeks. I grew out my hair, changed how I dressed, kept my head down and my mouth shut. After a month, I started to feel something I hadn't felt since that Thursday night. Safe. Like maybe the distance was enough. Maybe they'd stopped looking. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was walking back from the corner store with a bag of groceries when I saw it. A black SUV parked across the street from the mechanic shop. Engine off, windows tinted. Nobody in this town drove anything like that. My legs stopped moving before my brain caught up. I just stood there on the sidewalk, holding a bag of rice and canned beans, staring at a vehicle that might as well have been a coffin on wheels. Then the door opened, and a man stepped out that I recognized. Not personally, I'd never spoken to him, but I'd seen him at the compound during those last few days. One of the new guys, the ones with the holsters and the empty eyes. He was here, in my town, standing 60 feet from the room where my money was sitting in gym bags under the bed. I didn't run. Every instinct told me to, but I knew that running would confirm everything. So I did the only thing I could think of. I kept walking, not toward the shop, away from it, slowly, like a man with nowhere important to be. I turned the corner, cut through an alley behind a laundromat, and circled 3 blocks to the back of the mechanics building. There was a fire escape on the side that the owner never locked because the latch was broken. I climbed it, got into my room through the window, grabbed both gym bags, stuffed what little I had into my jacket, and climbed back down. I could hear them. Voices at the front of the building. The mechanic talking to someone. Sounding confused. Maybe scared. They were asking about tenants. About new faces. About a young guy who paid cash. I had maybe 2 minutes before they came around back or up the stairs. I cut through a drainage ditch behind the building that led to a dirt road on the edge of town. Walked that road for 4 miles carrying 2 gym bags until I reached a gas station where a freight truck was parked with the driver inside eating lunch. I offered him cash to take me to the next city. Didn't tell him why. Didn't need to. He looked at the money, looked at me, and said, "Get in." I never went back to that town. I don't know if they searched my room. I don't know if they found anything I left behind. I don't know how close I actually was to dying that afternoon. But I know this. When I was sitting in the back of that freight truck, watching that town shrink in the distance, my hands weren't shaking anymore. They were completely still, and that scared me more than the men did, because it meant some part of me had accepted that this was my life now. Running, hiding, looking over my shoulder until the day I stop. I found another town. Smaller, quieter, the kind of place where people come to be forgotten, and everybody respects that without asking why. I rented a room, got a job doing manual labor for a man who paid in cash, and didn't care what my name was. And I started the slow, miserable process of realizing that $10 million had bought me absolutely nothing. I couldn't spend the money without drawing attention. So I used it in drops. A little for rent, a little for food, never enough to make anyone look twice. But every time I peeled a bill off that stack, I thought about my mother, about the guys at the stash house who were probably paying for what I did, about the man I saw dragged out of a warehouse years ago for stealing a few thousand. I wondered if someone was going through that right now because of me. The money lasted about 2 years, and in those 2 years, I lost everything it can't buy back. I couldn't contact my family, couldn't go home, couldn't use my real name, couldn't make a single honest connection with another human being. Every friendship I'd ever had was severed. Every place I'd ever felt safe was burned. I was alive, but living like a ghost, haunting a town that didn't know me, spending stolen money that bought nothing but silence and guilt. Eventually, I heard through a chain of whispers that the cartel had moved on. Not forgiveness, they don't do that. The dispute that caused the mistransport had blown into something much bigger. Senior people disappeared. Power shifted. New bosses came in who didn't know my face and didn't care about 10 million when they were restructuring territories worth hundreds of millions. My theft became a rounding error in someone else's war. I got lucky. Not smart. Lucky. The only reason I'm alive is because the universe was looking somewhere else that week. But lucky doesn't mean free. I'm in my 30s now. I live alone. I work a job that doesn't ask about my past, and I don't offer anything. I haven't spoken to my mother in years. Last I heard, she moved, changed her number, started over. I don't blame her. I am the worst thing that ever happened to the person I love most, and no amount of money fixes that. I still have some of the cash, not much. It sits in a bag at the back of a closet, like a souvenir from the worst decision of my life. People think the scary part of this story is the cartel, the guns, the men who find you in towns they shouldn't know about, but it's not. The scary part is how fast one thought unravels everything. One quiet what if on a Thursday night under a broken ceiling fan. That's all it took, and it cost me my mother, my home, my name, everything I was, and everything I could have been. $10 million. And I'd give back every single cent just to sit at that breakfast table one more time. Let me ask you something. If you were in that room, alone, with $10 million in cash and a window to take it, would you do it? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. And if this story kept you watching till the end, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.